My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 29 years old, and 3 years ago, I heard 3 words that changed everything. She's just a waitress. My own mother said it at my sister's engagement party. Loud enough for the whole room to hear. She didn't know I was standing 10 feet behind her, still wearing my uniform, holding a gift I'd brought to congratulate my sister. That night, I made a decision. I was done being invisible. Done letting them define me. Because what they didn't know was that the waitress they mocked actually owned the restaurant. I was 25 when I walked away from everything my parents had planned for me. I'd been 2 years into an MBA program when my grandmother got sick. Joan Morgan, the woman who raised me while my parents built their empire, needed someone. And I couldn't just abandon her. My mother, Carol, suggested we put her in a facility. Something tasteful, she said, with professional staff. My father, Harold, agreed it made financial sense. My younger sister, Vanessa, was too busy planning her marketing career to visit. But Joan had been there for every scraped knee, every failed test, every heartbreak. She'd packed my lunches when my parents were closing deals in Manhattan. She taught me that kindness wasn't weakness, it was strength. So I left school, came back to our hometown outside Hartford, Connecticut, found a small apartment above a bakery, and took a job at Delaney's, an upscale restaurant downtown. I worked tables at night, cared for Joan during the day. It wasn't the life my parents envisioned, but it was mine. Delaney's became my second home. I learned the rhythm of service, the art of reading people, the quiet dignity in work others looked down on. My coworkers became friends. Jess, a single mom with 2 kids, taught me to carry 4 plates at once. Luis, the sous chef, would sneak me leftover risotto on slow nights. Yvonne, the sharp-tongued hostess, would cover my sections when Joan had bad days. My family barely called. When they did, conversations were brief and uncomfortable. My mother would ask when I was going back to school. My father would mention job openings. Vanessa would talk about her engagement to Daniel, whose family owned half the commercial real estate in the county. Nobody asked how Joan was doing. 3 months before Vanessa's engagement party, Joan passed away peacefully in her sleep. I was holding her hand. The funeral was tasteful and efficient. My mother handled everything like a project. She cried elegantly during the service. My father gave a brief speech about family legacy. Vanessa posted a beautiful photo on social media. I didn't cry until everyone left. Joan had been my anchor. Without her, I felt untethered, floating in a life that didn't quite fit. But I kept working, kept showing up, kept smiling at customers who snapped their fingers for water. Then came the invitation. Vanessa sent a group text. Engagement party Saturday at Mom and Dad's. Starts at 7. Ra, you're welcome to stop by after your shift. No need to dress up. No need to dress up. Translation, we know you'll be coming from work. We know you'll look out of place. I almost didn't go, but something in me, maybe Joan's voice, told me to show up. So I clocked out at 7:45, still in my uniform, and walked 3 blocks to the house I'd grown up in. The party was in full swing. Crystal champagne flutes caught the light from garden lanterns. Women in designer dresses laughed at jokes that weren't funny. Men in expensive suits discussed vacation homes in the Hamptons. I entered through the side door. Nobody noticed me at first. I made my way toward the garden, clutching a small wrapped box. Inside was a vintage pendant Joan had told me about, something Vanessa had loved as a child. That's when I heard her voice. My mother, standing near the rose bushes with 3 other women from her PR firm. Her tone was honeyed, dripping with false sympathy. She's just a waitress, she said, pausing for effect. My older daughter, Rachel. So much potential, and now she serves food for tips. It's tragic, really. The women made sympathetic noises. One touched my mother's arm in mock comfort. She won't be here long, my mother continued. Let's pray she doesn't bring one of those tragic trays with her. Laughter rippled through the group like poison in champagne. I stood frozen. My hand gripped the gift box so hard the edges cut into my palm. I wanted to disappear, but Joan's voice echoed in my head. Never let them make you small, she'd always said. You're capable of extraordinary things. So I walked forward, stepped onto the terrace. A few heads turned. My mother's smile became plastic. Vanessa blinked like she was surprised I'd shown up. My father found something fascinating to look at across the garden. I handed Vanessa the gift. "Congratulations," I said evenly. "Oh, thanks. You didn't have to." She glanced at my uniform. "We weren't sure you'd make it." Neither was I. The silence was excruciating. I stayed exactly 15 minutes, long enough to prove I'd been there, short enough to preserve my dignity. Nobody tried to stop me when I left. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, something shifted. Not just hurt, not just anger, a decision. I was done being quiet, done letting their judgment define my worth, because they had no idea who I really was. What my family didn't know was that I'd been building something that started small and grew into an empire they never saw coming. It began about 18 months after I started at Delaney's. I'd been working late shifts, getting home around midnight, my feet aching. I couldn't sleep. So I started writing. Just observations at first. Things I noticed about how the restaurant operated, inefficiencies in kitchen workflow, ways to reduce food waste, how better scheduling could improve profit margins and employee satisfaction. I called it The Profit Plate, a blog about boutique restaurant management and profitability strategies. I didn't use my real name, just RM. I figured maybe a few industry people would read it. My first post was about labor cost optimization without cutting staff. I'd calculated that Delaney's was losing about $15,000 annually on poor scheduling alone. Servers standing around during slow periods, not enough staff during rush hours. Simple fixes that could transform the bottom line while improving working conditions. I hit publish at 2 a.m. and went to bed. By morning, the post had been shared 300 times. Within a week, I had 5,000 subscribers. Restaurant owners started reaching out, asking for consulting. Small operations at first. A family-run Italian place in Boston needed help with inventory. A struggling bistro in Providence wanted advice on menu pricing. I charged modest fees, did the work after my shifts, and watched my bank account slowly grow. 6 months in, a venture capital investor from New York found my blog. His name was Marcus Chen, and he managed a fund specializing in hospitality investments. He didn't know I was a waitress. He thought I was an established consultant. We had coffee, talked strategy, and he asked if I'd ever considered buying into a restaurant. "I've thought about it," I said carefully. "You should. You have insights most operators miss. You see the business from angles MBA types don't understand." He introduced me to Sarah Goldstein, an angel investor who'd made her fortune in tech and wanted to diversify into food service. She loved my approach, data-driven, but with genuine respect for staff and culture. She asked what property I had my eye on. I told her about Delaney's. The owners were getting older, thinking about retirement. I knew every inch of that restaurant, every strength and weakness. She ran the numbers, reviewed my blog analytics, and made me an offer. She'd put up $200,000. Marcus's fund would add another $150,000. I'd contribute $30,000 from my consulting savings and take majority ownership. 51%. Control. It took 6 months to structure the deal. Lawyers, contracts, non-disclosure agreements. The existing owners, a retired couple named Thompson, were thrilled to sell to someone who genuinely cared about their legacy. They thought I was just a smart investor. They had no idea I'd been serving their customers for 3 years. We closed 3 weeks before Vanessa's engagement party. I became the majority shareholder of Delaney's on a Tuesday afternoon in a lawyer's office downtown. I signed papers for 2 hours straight, my hand cramping, my heart racing. When it was done, Sarah shook my hand and said, "Welcome to ownership, Rachel. Now comes the real work." I didn't tell anyone. Not my coworkers, not my family. Not even Jess, who I considered a real friend. I wanted to prove something to myself first. Wanted to make sure I could actually do this before anyone had a chance to doubt me. I kept working my shifts like nothing had changed. Kept smiling at difficult customers, kept splitting tips with other servers. But late at night, I was meeting with accountants and reviewing expansion plans and learning about liquor licensing and health code compliance. I brought in Philip Russo as general manager. He'd been assistant manager for 5 years and knew the operation inside out. I told him about my ownership 1 week before I planned to go public. He just laughed and said, "I knew you were too smart to be serving drinks forever. When do we make the announcement?" "Soon," I said. I'm waiting for the right moment. That moment came the morning after my mother called me a tragic waitress in front of her friends. That night, sitting in my apartment, I sent Philip a text. Tomorrow morning, staff meeting at 8:30. I'm telling everyone, and I'm arriving in style. He responded immediately. About time, boss. I contacted a luxury car service, rented a Rolls-Royce Phantom for the day. Midnight blue, leather interior, the kind of car that made a statement. I bought a charcoal pantsuit from a boutique in West Hartford. Picked up heels I'd never worn before. I barely slept. Kept playing the moment over in my mind. The look on everyone's faces, the shift in power, the proof that I was more than they'd let themselves see. At 7 in the morning, I got dressed, looked at myself in the mirror, and barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because I looked different, because I finally looked like who I'd always been underneath the uniform. The Rolls-Royce picked me up at 8:15. As we drove toward Delaney's, the morning sun glinting off the hood, I thought about Joan, about what she'd say if she could see this moment. She'd probably just smile and say, "I always knew, sweetheart. I always knew." The car pulled up to Delaney's at exactly 8:28. Through the tinted windows, I could see staff arriving. Jess carrying her usual oversized coffee. Luis, still in his motorcycle jacket. Yvonne, checking her phone. None of them noticed the Rolls-Royce at first. Then I stepped out. The effect was immediate. Jess stopped walking mid-stride, her mouth falling open. Luis did a double take, nearly dropping his helmet. Yvonne's eyes went wide behind her sunglasses. Philip was waiting by the entrance, fighting back a grin. He stepped forward with perfect timing, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Welcome back, boss." I saw Jess mouth the word boss to herself, confused. Luis looked at Philip, then at me, trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. I walked past them with a small smile, heels clicking against the sidewalk, and entered through the front doors of my own restaurant. Inside, whispers had already started. Staff members who'd arrived earlier were watching through the windows. Marcus, one of the bartenders, nudged Sophia, a server I'd trained 6 months ago. Their expressions shifted from confusion to shock to something like awe. Philip guided me through the dining room. Morning light streamed through tall windows, catching the polished wood and brass fixtures. I'd walked this path thousands of times carrying trays. Now I walked it as the owner, and everything felt different. The staff room was crowded. About 15 people packed into a space meant for 10. Everyone went quiet when I entered. Jess was near the front, her coffee forgotten. Luis stood by the lockers, arms crossed. Yvonne leaned against the wall, one eyebrow raised. Philip cleared his throat. "Thanks for coming in early, everyone. I know 8:30 is rough, but we have important news this morning." You could hear the collective intake of breath. "As of last month," Philip continued, "Delaney's changed ownership. The Thompson family has retired and the restaurant is now under new management." Confused murmurs rippled through the room. Jess looked scared, probably worried about layoffs. Luis shifted his weight, jaw tight. New ownership usually meant changes, cuts, restructuring. Philip gestured toward me. "I'd like you all to welcome your new majority shareholder and executive director, Rachel Morgan." The silence was absolute. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Jess's mouth fell open for the second time that morning. Luis's eyes went so wide I thought they might fall out. Yvonne's cool composure cracked completely. I stepped forward, keeping my voice calm. "Hi, I know this is unexpected. Some of you have worked alongside me for years. Some of you might only know me as that server who always got stuck with difficult tables on Sunday brunch." A few nervous laughs. For the past 2 years, I've been building something outside these walls. A consulting business focused on restaurant profitability and culture. Through that work, I connected with investors who believed in my vision. Together, we acquired controlling interest in this restaurant and 2 others in the Hartford metro area. Delaney's is our flagship property. I paused, letting them absorb it. Jess had tears in her eyes. Luis just kept shaking his head. Starting immediately, we're implementing changes. First, wages increase 8% across the board for all hourly employees. Second, We're adding wellness stipends of $50 per month for gym memberships, therapy, childcare, whatever supports your well-being. Third, everyone here is now eligible for quarterly performance bonuses based on individual contribution and team success. The gasps were audible now. Jess actually started crying. Marcus let out a low whistle. Even Ivan looked impressed. But more than the money, I continued, I want this place to reflect what it should have been all along. A restaurant that values people, not just profits. I've been on your side of the table. I know what it's like to work a double on your birthday because rent is due. I know what it's like to smile while someone snaps their fingers at you like you're invisible. That ends here. We're going to build something better together. Luis raised his hand slowly. So you really own this place now? I smiled. For real. 51%, and I plan to make it the best restaurant in Connecticut. Jess laughed through her tears. My mother is never going to believe this. Yvonne pushed off from the wall and walked toward me. She'd always been intimidating. She stopped in front of me, studying my face. So all those nights we thought you were just another burned-out graduate school dropout? I was, I said honestly. But I also had a plan. She nodded slowly, a smile breaking through. Well, boss, I guess I should have been nicer to you. You were fine, I said. And you're one of the best hosts I've ever worked with. That's why you're staying. Relief flooded her face. The whole room seemed to exhale collectively. Philip checked his watch. All right, everyone. We open in 2 hours. Let's make today excellent. People started filing out, but several stopped to shake my hand or offer congratulations. Jess hugged me hard, whispering, Thank you. You have no idea what this means. I hugged her back. Actually, I do. As the room cleared, Philip hung back. That went well. You ready for the next part? I checked my watch. 10:45. My mother's client lunch was scheduled for 11 in the private dining room. She'd booked it 2 weeks ago, having no idea who actually owned the restaurant now. Is everything set up? I asked. Perfect. Fresh linens, custom menus, champagne chilling, your mother's usual table. Good. I'll be watching from behind the glass partition. When they're seated and comfortable, that's when I'll make my entrance. Philip's grin was wicked. This is going to be legendary. No, I said quietly. This is just going to be the truth. At 10:58, I positioned myself behind the frosted glass wall. I heard the click of heels, my mother's voice crisp and commanding. Make sure no one disturbs us. This client is very important. I watched the blurred shapes settle into chairs, heard the rustle of menus, the clink of water glasses. Then my mother's voice again, lower now, conspiratorial. My older daughter, Rachel. Such a shame. Brilliant girl, but emotionally impulsive. She's just a waitress now. Wasted all that potential. I checked my reflection one last time, smoothed my jacket, took one deep breath, then I walked through the door. The door slid open silently. My heels clicked against the polished hardwood with deliberate rhythm. 4 steps in before my mother looked up, ready to scold whichever server had dared interrupt. Then she saw me. Her face went through a remarkable transformation. Confusion first, then recognition, her eyes widening, then something close to panic. The client, a woman in her 50s wearing navy and expensive pearls, noticed my mother's reaction and turned. I extended my hand to her, keeping my voice warm and professional. Hello, I'm Rachel Morgan, Executive Director of Delaney's and majority shareholder in Morgan Hospitality Group. I wanted to personally welcome you and thank you for dining with us today. The woman stood automatically. She shook my hand with a firm grip. Oh, well, this is unexpected. What wonderful service. Rachel. My mother's voice cut through, sharp and strained. What are you doing here? I turned to her calmly. Running my restaurant, Mother? Didn't Philip mention it when you made the reservation? Delaney's changed ownership last month. I oversee all operations now. The client's head swiveled between us. Wait, this is your daughter? You didn't mention she owned the restaurant. My mother's laugh came out strangled. I wasn't aware. Rachel has had many ventures. I didn't realize this was one of them. You weren't aware, I said gently, because you never asked. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. The client's expression shifted from confusion to understanding to something like fascination. I gestured to the menus. Please, enjoy your lunch. The chef has prepared several specials today. Everything is on the house, of course. The client's professional mask snapped back into place. That's very generous, Miss Morgan. Thank you. You're welcome. If you need anything at all, I'll be just outside. I turned and left without looking at my mother again. I didn't need to. I'd felt the power shift, felt the ground move beneath her feet. That was enough. Back in the hallway, Philip handed me an espresso. You good? Better than good. I think she's finally speechless. The lunch lasted 90 minutes. When they finally emerged, my mother's smile was brittle. Her goodbye to the client overly bright. She didn't look for me. Just left quickly, heels clicking urgently toward the exit. That evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Dinner at Mom and Dad's, 6:30. Apparently, there's something we all need to discuss. I stared at the message for a long moment. The old Rachel would have declined, would have hidden. But I wasn't that person anymore. I replied, I'll be there. At 6:25, I pulled into my parents' driveway in a different Rolls-Royce. Not rented this time. Purchased 2 days earlier with cash from my consulting contract. Midnight blue with cream leather interior. A tangible symbol of success they couldn't dismiss. Inside, the living room felt smaller than I remembered. My father stood by the fireplace, scotch in hand. Vanessa sat on the couch, scrolling her phone. My mother paced near the window, her power suit perfectly pressed but her composure cracking. She stopped when she saw me. You could have given us a heads up. Would it have made a difference? I asked, setting my keys down. You embarrassed me, she snapped, in front of a major client. No, I corrected quietly. You embarrassed yourself by lying about who I was. I just told the truth. My father raised his hand. Let's not fight. Carol, sit down. She did, reluctantly. Vanessa finally looked up. So you really own Delaney's now? I do, plus 2 other properties. We're opening a 4th location next spring. My mother's laugh was bitter. With what money? With the money I made from my consulting business, strategic partnerships, and investors who believed in me before my own family did. The silence was crushing. My father stared into his drink. Vanessa looked genuinely thoughtful. My mother's jaw tightened. Why didn't you tell us? My father asked finally. Because you never listened. Why would this have been different? My mother's mask slipped completely. So what is this? Revenge? I stood straighter, meeting her eyes. No. This is me living the life I built without your approval. But today made one thing clear. Your opinion doesn't define me anymore. Vanessa nodded slowly. I mean, respect. It was the closest thing to praise I'd ever heard from her. My father cleared his throat. Well, congratulations, Rachel. That's quite an achievement. I didn't respond because the truth was, I didn't need their validation anymore. I stood there in that living room, surrounded by people who'd once made me feel small and felt nothing but peace. I'd won, but not the way they thought. I'd won by becoming someone who didn't need to win. 2 days later, my phone lit up with a text from my mother. Are you free for coffee? I stared at the message. Was this a trap? Or something else, something vulnerable? I texted back. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Café Blanc. She replied immediately. I'll be there. I arrived 5 minutes early. She walked in at 10:03, ordered something complicated, and sat down without a word. For a long moment, we just sat there. She spoke first. You didn't just buy a restaurant. You built an empire. I built a business, I corrected. I looked up your blog. I didn't even know you wrote. You never asked. She flinched. I suppose I didn't. She looked older than I remembered. Not physically, but in her eyes. Why didn't you tell me about any of it? I tried. Dozens of times, you'd cut me off, change the subject, compare me to Vanessa. It became easier to stop trying. She exhaled slowly. I was trying to protect you. From what? From failure? From embarrassment? From throwing your life away chasing ideas that didn't make sense to us? To you, I corrected. They made sense to me. I know that now. The admission hung between us, fragile and unexpected. She looked out the window. Your grandmother would be proud. That hit harder than anything else. My throat tightened. She was the only one who never doubted me. She believed in things we didn't understand, my mother admitted, and now I wish I'd listened to her more. She stirred her coffee slowly. Your father and I didn't know how to support something we couldn't control. We raised you to follow a plan. When you deviated from it, we panicked. And we judged. Yes, I said simply. You did. And we were wrong. There it was. Not quite a full apology, but closer than I'd ever expected. Then she surprised me. Would you ever consider consulting for my agency? Your skills could help us. I blinked. You're offering me work? I'm offering partnership, not as my daughter, as a professional whose expertise I respect. It wasn't just a peace offering, it was recognition. Let me think about it, I said. She nodded. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box. What's this? I found it in your grandmother's things. She left instructions that it was meant for you. I opened the box slowly. Inside was a delicate gold locket. I recognized it immediately. Joan had worn it every Sunday. My hands trembled as I opened the clasp. Inside was a tiny photograph of me at 5 years old, and tucked behind it was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it carefully. Joan's handwriting. Never forget what you're capable of, even when they do. Love always, Grandma Joan. The tears came before I could stop them. I closed the locket and held it tight. She always saw you, my mother whispered. Even when we didn't. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We sat in silence for a while longer. Not comfortable exactly, but not hostile either. Just two women trying to find their way back to something that might resemble understanding. 3 months later, I stood on the porch of Joan's old house. The house was mine now, officially transferred. I was transforming it into a creative retreat for women starting over. Women who'd been dismissed, underestimated, told they were wasting their potential. As sunset painted the walls gold, I looked at the house and felt something I hadn't in years: peace. I no longer needed anyone to clap for me. I no longer craved validation in rooms where I was once laughed at. I had become the woman my younger self needed. Not perfect, but whole. And when I stood in front of those future guests, I would tell them, you are not just a waitress or a secretary or a woman starting over. You are more than the labels they gave you. Your path is not just valid, it's powerful. If this story resonated with you, I want to hear from you. Have you ever been underestimated by the people closest to you? Have you ever built something in silence, proving yourself when no one was watching? Share your story in the comments below. Your journey matters, and someone out there needs to hear it. If Rachel's transformation inspired you, hit that subscribe button for more stories about resilience, redemption, and rising above the labels others place on us. Remember, you're not defined by their limitations. You're defined by your courage to keep going.